What inspired Tolkien to create the vast world of the Lord of the Rings, full of creatures, languages, and myths? In this video, we will explore the influences that shaped Middle-earth and how Tolkien used ancient mythologies to bring the Lord of the Rings to life. But before we continue, I'm very interested to know if you know this world from the books, movies, or the Rings of Power series. Write me below in the comments to know your opinion. One of the main influences on Tolkien's work was Norse mythology. Creatures such as elves, dwarves, and dragons have clear roots in the Germanic and Scandinavian sagas. In Norse mythology, elves are powerful beings associated with nature and with a magical realm separate from the human world, known as Alfheim. Similarly, Tolkien's elves inhabit ancient forests and possess a wisdom that transcends the understanding of mortal men. In Tolkien's mythology, the elves are the first children of Ilúvatar, created before men and blessed with immortality. They are a noble race, with a great connection to nature and a wisdom that surpasses that of any other creature in Middle-earth. Elves, in addition to being immortal, are also beings of unparalleled beauty, masters in the creation of art and music, and are the keepers of Middle-earth's most ancient history. Unlike men, who have a short and limited lifespan, elves carry with them the memory of all previous ages. This longevity allows them to accumulate wisdom, but it also burdens them with the weight of past suffering and tragedies. Tolkien's elves have clear parallels to the Alfars of Norse mythology, mystical beings who live in magical realms such as Alfheim. In Celtic mythology, there are also the Sidhe, immortal beings who inhabit hidden realms and have an ambiguous relationship with humans. Tolkien's elves combine elements of both traditions, blending the beauty and immortality of the Sidhe with the craftsmanship and wisdom of the Alfar. One of the most important aspects of Elvish mythology is their relationship with Valinor. In the early days of creation, many of the elves were called to travel to Valinor, where they lived in harmony with the Valar and learned much of their knowledge. This journey is known as the Great Journey, and not all elves chose to undertake it. The elves who accepted the call of the Valar and traveled to Valinor became the Calaquendi, light elves, while those who decided to stay in Middle-earth are known as the Morikendi, dark elves. The Light Elves, such as Galadriel, brought the wisdom and power of Valinor with them to Middle-earth, while the Dark Elves, such as Thranduil and his kingdom in the Black Forest, remained in Middle-earth, but with less influence from the Valar. Turning now to humans, or men, these are the second sons of Ilúvatar, created after the Elves. Unlike the Elves, who are immortal, humans are mortal and have a limited lifespan. This mortality, known as the gift of Ilúvatar, is both a blessing and a source of fear for humans, as it grants them freedom of action and destiny, but also condemns them to an ephemeral life compared to elven immortals. In the Silmarillion, it is described that, after the creation of the elves, Ilúvatar granted men the gift of free will, allowing them to forge their own destiny, not bound to the predetermined fate of Arda. Unlike the elves, whose lives are bound to the cycles of the world, men are destined to die and leave the confines of Arda, to a destiny unknown even to the Valar. The mortality of humans is central to their identity in Middle-earth. While many of the men see death as a curse, Tolkien presents it as a gift, the freedom to leave the world and follow a destiny beyond understanding. This mortality allows them to change the course of history, as they are not as bound to the physical world as the elves, and can make decisions without being influenced by an immutable destiny. The dwarves of Middle-earth are also deeply inspired by the Norse sagas. In the Germanic texts, dwarves, dvergar, are master craftsmen who dwell in the mountains, creating magical objects. Tolkien's dwarves, like Gimli and his companions, share these characteristics. They are skilled miners and brave warriors who dwell in subway realms such as Moria, even though it was once known as Khazad-dûm. Beyond their ability to work stone and metal, dwarves are a complex race with a fascinating mythological history. Unlike men and elves, their origin is marked by the intervention of one of the Valar, Aule, the blacksmith. In the Silmarillion, it is related that Aule, one of the Valar, created the dwarves before Ilúvatar, the supreme god of Tolkien's mythology, gave life to the elves and men. Aule, impatient to see the creatures that would inhabit the world, forged the dwarves in secret, but in the end submitted to the will of Ilúvatar, who allowed the dwarves to live, but on the condition that they would not awaken before the elves. Like the dwarves, Dvergar of Norse mythology, Tolkien's dwarves are known for their skill in forging and creating magical items. In the Germanic sagas, dwarves are the craftsmen who forge some of the most powerful weapons and artifacts, such as the sword Tyrfing or the ring Andvaranaut. The dwarves of Middle-earth, like those who inhabit Erebor, are also known for their great works, such as the Gate of Moria, or the creation of legendary weapons. But back to the Andvaranaut ring. In Norse mythology, it is a cursed ring that plays a central role in the Nibelungen saga and other Germanic legends. The story begins with the dwarf Andvari, who lived in a cave under a waterfall and possessed a magic ring that allowed him to amass great wealth. One day, the god Loki steals the ring and Andvari's treasure to pay a ransom. But Andvari curses the ring, decreeing that it will bring misfortune to anyone who possesses it. Throughout the sagas, the ring passes from hand to hand, causing death and misfortune to all its bearers. One of the most famous was Fafnir, who turned into a dragon to protect the treasure, and then Sigurd, Siegfried in the Germanic version, who killed him and kept the ring, also facing the fatal consequences of possessing this ring. The Andvaranaut ring symbolizes greed, the curse of absolute power, and the price of ambition. Although it is a magical object of great power, it also carries a curse that destroys those who seek and possess it, condemning them to a tragic fate. In Tolkien's work, the One Ring, created by Sauron, is a source of immense power that corrupts all those who touch or possess it. Similar to the Andvaranaut ring, the One Ring is associated with evil and has destructive power over those who desire it, to the point that it destroys their lives, bringing them to ruin. Sauron forged the One Ring in secret to dominate the other bearers of the Rings of Power. In doing so, he bound much of his own life force to the ring, making it the most powerful object in Middle-earth. However, like the Andvaranaut, this ring is also a source of evil and tragedy. Throughout the history of Middle-earth, those who come into contact with the One Ring are consumed by its power. In both stories, the ring is cursed. The Andvaranaut carries with it a curse pronounced by Andvari, while the One Ring is imbued with the evil of Sauron, making it a trap for anyone who attempts to use it. In both stories, the rings bring tragedy to those who desire them. Tolkien, as a scholar of medieval and Norse literature, was deeply familiar with the Germanic and Scandinavian sagas. Although there is no direct evidence that the Andvaranaut ring was the primary inspiration for the One Ring, the similarities are evident. Before we get into the dark world of orcs, if you have come this far and liked the video, I ask you to subscribe, to comment, but above all to share this video with your friends. This is a great way to help me reach more people. Let's continue. Orcs, the deformed and evil creatures that serve Sauron in Middle-earth, are one of the most terrifying and disturbing elements of Tolkien's mythology. But where do these beings come from? What is their true origin, and what do they mean within the larger context of Middle-earth mythology? According to the Silmarillion, orcs were created by Morgoth, the first Dark Lord in ancient days. Morgoth, unable to create life on his own, is said to have captured and corrupted the elves, transforming them into orcs through torture and dark magic. This makes them a symbol of the perversion of good, since they were originally noble beings who were degraded by evil. Orcs represent the antithesis of divine creation in Tolkien's mythology. While the elves, as Ilúvatar's creation, embody beauty, light, and harmony with nature, the orcs represent the corruption of these ideals. The existence of orcs symbolizes how evil cannot create, only distort and destroy what already exists. Tolkien also uses the orcs as a metaphor for the dehumanization he saw in war and industrialization. Turning now to one of the most powerful creatures of this world, we find the dragon Smaug, the antagonist of The Hobbit. This is clearly inspired by the dragon Fafnir of the Volsungen saga, which I mentioned before, in the part of the ring. Both Smaug and Fafnir are greedy guardians of treasure, and both are defeated by lone heroes. The hero facing a dragon is a recurring motif in Germanic and Norse literature, and Tolkien adapted it to his fantasy world. Tolkien's use of Norse mythology is not merely superficial. He transforms these myths into something new, giving them emotional depth and an epic context within Middle-earth. The result is a world that feels ancient and rooted in history, but also completely original. In addition to Norse mythology, Tolkien also drew inspiration from Celtic mythology, particularly the relationship between nature and the supernatural. While Tolkien denied the direct influence of Celtic mythology on his work, many elements of his stories suggest a deep connection to the magical atmosphere and enchanted landscapes of Celtic myths. In Celtic mythology, the other world is a magical realm inhabited by immortal beings. This concept is reflected in the immortality of Tolkien's elves and in the existence of places like Valinor, the land of the Valar, a heavenly realm to which elves can return to escape the corruption of the mortal world. The deep connection between elves and nature in Middle-earth has parallels with the feric spirits of Celtic mythology, which are linked to rivers, forests, and mountains. The relationship between elves and mortals and the way in which the elves must eventually leave Middle-earth echoes Celtic stories of the withdrawal of gods and supernatural beings from the human world. Another lesser-known but equally important influence on Tolkien's work is the Cavala, a Finnish epic that recounts the adventures of mythical heroes and gods. Tolkien's interest in Germanic and Finnish languages led him to discover this gem of mythology, and many elements of the Kalevala are interwoven into his own creation. The character of Turin, from the Silmarillion, has similarities with Kullervo, a tragic hero of the Kalevala. Both characters are marked by fatality and suffer a series of personal tragedies that lead them to a bitter fate. Turin's story is permeated with this same tragic hopelessness, similar to Kullervo's cycle of curses and tragedies. The connection between the two heroes is not just superficial. Both Turin and Kullervo, despite their good intentions, are dragged down by a fate that seems beyond their control. Their heroic acts, far from leading them to glory, only aggravate their downfall. Tolkien's use of the Kalevala allowed him to explore darker and more tragic themes, contrasting with the more heroic stories of other myths. And one cannot speak of Tolkien's mythology without mentioning his deep passion for language creation. For Tolkien, language was the heart of culture, and to create a complete world, he needed to develop languages that were not only functional, but also told stories and reflected the history of their speakers. Elvish languages are clear examples of this. Inspired by Finnish and Welsh respectively, these languages are not just decorative, they have full grammars and are spoken by characters within the story. Elvish languages reflect the beauty and longevity of the elves and are a window into their ancient culture. The creation of fictional languages in Tolkien's work goes far beyond the simple invention of words. Each language is connected to the history of the races that speak them. For example, the Black language of Mordor, used by Sauron and his servants, is rough and harsh, reflecting the evil of its creator. For Tolkien, language was inseparable from mythology. By creating complex and detailed languages, he added realism to his world and brought the cultures of Middle-earth to life. This linguistic approach is one of the most original and distinctive aspects of his mythology. Tolkien gave us more than just a story. He created a fantasy world full of magic, heroism, and tragedy, inspired by ancient mythologies, but transformed into something completely new. And if you liked this video as much as I did creating it, I recommend you to take a look at the video of the mythology behind Game of Thrones, as I think you might find it interesting.